Hey, Ciarán, hello. How are you? Thanks for coming on the pod.
Hi, Lindsay. How are you? Thanks for having me.
No, I'm so happy to have you here today. I don't think I have had a founder in the news space on my Behind the Builder podcast yet. So thrilled to have you here. Everybody, please welcome Ciarán. He's the founder of Olas. He also has been in crypto for a very, very long time. Industry of professional since about 2011 is what he said to me. And we've got episode 29 of Behind the Builder podcast. Ciarán, I'd like to hand it off to you to give a short background about yourself and what you're building at Olas.
Okay, yeah, sure. So my name's Ciarán, founder of Olas. We're building a decentralized media project. My background is, I guess, economics. I was working in the European Commission in the trade, DG trade, in an anti-dumping capacity when someone sent me the Bitcoin white paper. And I remember reading it and going, wow, that's an unbelievable idea, but kind of forgot about it for a few months. And then Chuck Schumer in the US Senate, remember, made a speech about the Silk Road and how it needed to be shut down and stuff. I was like, wow, it's no longer theory. Okay, it might be being used for nefarious stuff, but this thing isn't just a really good idea. It's out there working. So I bought some and I got really heavily involved in Bitcoin Talk and various other forums. And I think within 6 months, I quit my job and I've been in crypto ever since. I was heavily involved in Ethereum in the early days, and I had a consultancy in London, and we advised on various projects. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I got an itch to build something myself, and we built a synthetic assets protocol, which was a moderate success, I would say. We didn't really market it, and we didn't try to take it on any further because the regulatory environment in that space became quite unfriendly. And I also had this other idea to do decentralized publishing, which have been something I've been more passionate about in general, I think. About 2.5 years ago, we started working on this idea, and we're excited to show it to the world soon.
Beautiful. This phrase decentralized publishing, I haven't really heard of it. It makes sense, of course, and I think it's something that is talked a lot more about as just this election cycle in the US has brought a lot of issues with fake media, maybe more than ever. And I'd like to ask you about what you're passionate about, and maybe you can talk about decentralized publishing a little bit, and how you got into that space in the first place.
Yeah, sure. What am I passionate about? Well, in general, tech, all things tech, the future, particularly stuff that advances societal knowledge, or particularly, even more particularly, systems that increase our capacity to harness our own knowledge, I guess, because we all have these biases that stop us from finding the truth, and we need to kind of come up with better systems to move us quicker to the truth, I guess, and find things out more quickly. So I guess that's what led me to Olas. And we started building a decentralized published platform for that ends. I believe that the world is going to Web3. The internet is going to Web3. It's going to be decentralized, and there'll be a decentralized version of most websites we have. Taking aim, though, at the news or academic publishing, what I would call quality controlled media or reviewed media, is not a very straightforward thing to take on as a Web3 builder. Often, to build a Web3 app, you just have to make it secure. Like, you can build a decentralized Twitter. They don't really have much quality control. I know they've started introducing community notes, but it's quite trivially easy to build a social media platform on a decentralized platform, as long as it has the capacity for the storage and throughput, which has been the problem up until now. But from a technical design point of view, for the app builder, it's not that crazy hard. But if you want to replace newspapers and academic publishing houses with a decentralized version that doesn't have a hierarchy, you lose your editorial review and your peer review committees. So we had to come up with ways of replacing those and hopefully making them better. We're quite confident we'll make it better through decentralized mechanisms. So that required a huge amount of R&D over the last 2 years. designing specific mechanisms so that without having a central authority would still be able to make sure misinformation doesn't spread or people don't get rewarded for telling outright lies. And that's been the big challenge. But I think we've gotten to a place now we're happy with the original initial design, at least, that we can go out, this will be good enough to work. Obviously, we'll iterate on that as it goes forward. But that's kind of where we're at now. We're building out opinion markets to hopefully trial in the end of April.
Okay, beautiful. So I want to talk about those opinion markets. I also want to ask you, though, how do you feel about companies like Blue Sky and Farcaster? Do you think they're too early?
Possibly. Well, Blue Sky's got traction, so actually probably not. Blue Sky's cool, federated model. It reminds me of I think it's XMPP network. I don't know if you remember Jabber. It's what Google Chat was built on and stuff. It's kind of a semi-decentralized system that works with it quite well. You can port your identity across the protocol, etc. It's really cool. It seems to have gotten traction mainly because of Elon Musk. A whole lot of people have fled Twitter since his purchase and his shenanigans, I guess, on the platform. I saw some number like 30% of UK Twitter users, or X users, of course, have left for Blue Sky, which is quite a huge number. Yeah, huge number.
Wow.
So I guess it's not too early then. It's doing quite well. Farcaster looks like it. It's got more constraints. It's on crypto rails. Well, partially. And it's because it's we forget in crypto how small we still are. When it's your world, you think it's massive.
Yeah.
But in terms of users on an internet scale, we're a drop in the ocean. And for that reason, I think it's very hard to get away from X's or now Blue Sky's network effects. It hasn't really been able to make inroads. I know a lot of people in the Ethereum community that went over there have kind of been gradually coming back because there's just more conversation to be had on X.
Yeah.
But its time will come, or some projects like that, its time will come.
Yeah. Okay. That's a fair, and fair statement. And I saw that I think that since we recently followed each other, since we met before, I mean, since I followed you before the pod on your Twitter, or X, whatever, and there's obviously been a lot of discourse this weekend about the Trump coin and things. Is there just a place where you'd like to share your opinions on that? Especially as an outsider, being from not the US, what's your thoughts?
Kind of complicated. I do think we all will have our own coin someday.
Yeah.
Every person, every institution, from businesses to local governments. And I think those coins will be very useful and they'll unlock a lot of value that's currently locked in the world. And that will be a good thing for humanity. But right now, because crypto hasn't proliferated to, I don't know, general use beyond speculation, it's very hard to make your meme coin useful for anything. So all it becomes is a game of musical chairs getting in and out, which I think if you're in the Trump's position and the size of your brand, I don't know, it just comes across this massive cash grab that, look, maybe they'll make something useful of it, but they haven't even come up with any type of plan to do that. It just seems like a money grab. So it leaves a sour taste, and it's stuff like this that, means crypto doesn't have a good name in a lot of other parts of society, which isn't great. So yeah, I suppose somebody has to start it. The early adopters are the ones where turn everyone's heads, and then it takes off. But yeah, it's got its downsides.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely hard for people to understand, which makes it I've heard both sides that it's net positive or just totally a bad thing. But if you are in the wave of everybody will eventually have their own token, and people were saying that institutions, cities will all have their own token. I was thinking about it, like if New York City had a token, is this technically, would it be a better tax system? Is that the point of it? Or would it be more for like,
It's more
I
for,
don't
it's
know.
almost like a loyalty thing. So
Yeah.
you could give discounted subway rides,
Oh,
or I don't know, all sorts of
yeah.
entry rights to public museums or whatever,
Yeah.
public spaces. And that always creates demand based on real utility, which currently Trump
Yeah.
coin doesn't have.
Yeah.
And that creates value for the token, which the city can extract to build more public services. So that's a
Mm,
really good thing.
okay.
And then
Yeah.
people can do that for themselves, their own services they offer as well. If you're a yoga teacher, you can have your own coin that gives discounts, which gives it value, and you may be able to save some of that value for a holiday at the end of the year. Who knows?
Hmm.
So there's definitely, utility there,
Yeah.
for sure. For tax, possibly. I don't know. It could be a good tax collecting thing as well. I haven't thought about that aspect, but sure.
Yeah. I could have gone and just asked ChatGPT. I was thinking about it yesterday when I saw that like Harvard would have a coin and whatever. But yeah, we're getting a little deep into tokens. I think it's pretty relevant for the weekend, but I
Mhm.
just wanted to. You've been in the industry for a long time. I've heard you. I'm sure you've had a lot of sleepless nights thinking about tokenomics and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, so we can get back to Olas. Also, sorry, I said your name wrong. Ciarán, because you have an accent on the A, don't you?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
Okay.
Kieran. Yeah,
Okay. My
it makes it like
apologies.
an O. No, you're all good.
Yes. Okay. So who are Olas's competitors? Because there's a lot of people you could go after here. Do you have competitors in your mind? What's your take on this?
Yeah, well, I guess there's two strands of how you can look at that. There is legacy media, which is
Hmm.
kind of who I have in my mind when you hear competitor, and then you've got other Web3 competitors that might be doing something. Um, I haven't really come across. I've seen there's a whole DeSci space, so I guess we're
Yeah.
in that. Research Coin, I think Brian Armstrong's the thing he's backed. I haven't looked too deeply into it, but my team have, and they say it's quite good.
Hmm.
Um, this project in India called Voice Stack is very interesting. But apart from that, I haven't really come across much that's turned my head. But when I think about competitors, I'm thinking New York Times and the Times of London or Telegraph or whoever else, or all the academic journals, because that's the biggest swindle
Hmm.
in history. That
Love
whole
it.
system. Um, so yeah, like there are what I call reviewed media, the places
Hmm.
we go to, what where we want high quality information, the places we trust. Now, I think we trust them way more than we should, but they're better than social media. So they're the kind of people I have in mind, or the institutions I have in mind, taking on.
Yeah. And I kind of just had a thought as you were going through that. If you are tackling these big um, legacy companies, the reason people go to them is because they're on top of it. They have good writers. Maybe people are loyal to what they say. When you're starting to grow Olus, who comes first, the audience or the people, like the
The
publishers and the
supply,
writers, the
the
supply?
supplier
So you're
demand.
focusing
Yeah,
on them first.
we're focusing on supply, because without supply, you don't have a product. And I think that's why a
Totally.
lot of Web3 plays haven't got to mass appeal yet,
Hmm.
beyond kind of trading and speculation on tokens. Well, one of the reasons was the tech just wasn't ready. You couldn't scale it. And
Hmm.
I think that is just literally being fixed as we speak, and pretty much is ready now.
Yep.
Um, but the other reason is that everyone had these cool ideas and they just released them out of the wild, like Ethereum was, and expected people to just use it.
Yeah.
And without incentives, they don't. So we're actually spending a huge amount of time, or me personally, because my engineers are spending their time building this. I'm trying to build a network of journalists who will be there. And I don't think we'll launch until we have thousands of journalists on
Yeah.
board. Version one, we're not going to do academic publishing, by the way. It's just too much to take on. We're just looking at news media and opinion for version one in about a
Hmm.
year and a half. And yeah, we hope to launch with thousands of journalists who are incentivized. We'll do a kind of like a mining program, I guess, or a farming program, whatever you want to call it, where the tokens will be issued for the first 3 years. and all early adopters basically get a stake in the protocol then.
Mm.
So there's quite an incentive. You can imagine the analogy is that early Uber drivers got paid in Uber equity. They would have done
Mm.
quite well, right?
It's a good
So
analogy.
yeah, so there's a financial incentive, and then also you just have to win people over beforehand, which is quite a tough task because a lot of journalists hate crypto. They just do. So we're trying to reach out and tell them, show them we're not crazy and our heart's in the right place,
Mm.
which is slowly but surely working. We're going to do a conference in Dublin during Dublin Tech Week in May as well.
Oh, beautiful.
So yeah, we're building out that side of things as well.
Mhm. What's your biggest selling point? Like, obviously, there's great incentive, but crypto's hard for people to swallow if they are not involved in it. How are you bringing these? What's your greatest selling point for bringing these journalists over?
Well, the flexibility, you've got no editorial direction. Like if you take the two UK-based newspapers, the Guardian and the Telegraph, they could not be more diametrically opposed, right and left.
Yeah.
You know, if you write for either of those papers, you're writing in a certain way, and if you don't write in a certain way, you get fired. There's a
Right.
direction you have to take, and so nobody knows when a journalist writes something in those newspapers, they really mean it.
Yeah.
And that's why trust in them is so low in all newspapers, because
Mhm.
they do genuinely have an agenda. So we free journalists from that. We free them from even just that bias aspect. We free them from having to. A lot of newspapers only have a certain amount of staff, and when a hot story comes out, some journalists might go, "Look, you have to write on that," and they're like, "I don't know anything about that topic," and they just have to make stuff up or like pretend
Yeah.
they're knowledgeable.
Yeah.
So that's like a bit crap as well. So all that type of stuff, it just really frees you up to write on what you want to write on, and while also we expect, because of our economic model, which is going to treat information like a public good, which is naturally is. I think all these business models on the internet right now are hacks. They're not really suited to information. Advertising ruins the reader experience, particularly when it's overdone. And
Yeah.
subscriptions are a nightmare. You know, the more you have, the more you like. I'm happy when I lose my credit card now because
Yeah.
I remember all these subscriptions
Let's
I paid
go.
for ages ago. Yeah, I just go,
Mhm.
I don't have to renew that.
Yeah.
And the subscription fatigue is set in. So that's actually stopping a huge amount of money flowing into the system.
Hmm.
So we're betting on, if you actually make it free without an ad polluted experience. I think people might add ads on to Olas. We can't really stop them. It's permissionless protocol.
Sure. Okay.
But we're not going to base our entire business model on it, so they don't pollute kind of how the information is
Mhm.
created. You don't have to get the click. You don't have
Yeah.
to be sensationalist. So it frees journalists up from that, while we believe with Web3, paying a journalist or just tipping an article, it's going to be as easy as liking a post on X now. So if you have no paywall and a nice user experience and high quality information, if you're a reader and you get to the bottom of that, like, you're going to tip. It doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
And if it's not paywalled, you might have thousands of people, and that adds up. So we
Okay.
expect a lot more money to flow in. If you take Wikipedia as an example, I think 2 to 3% of their readers donate, and that's with barely getting reminders. I only get reminded every few months in Wikipedia,
Mhm.
and it's also, they're asking for $20, $30, $50
Yeah.
in one go, and you have to whip out your credit card, which,
Yeah.
it's just that little bit of friction. You go, oh, I couldn't be bothered. So if we take that away, we're hopeful we can get up to like 15, 20, 30%.
Interesting.
So that will add up.
Okay. So yeah, can we backtrack 1 second?
Yep.
Because I wanted to ask you, so explain from top to bottom this donations feature. So you said that as somebody scrolls at the bottom of a post, they can like it, it's attached to their wallet, and they can tip on something that they like. It's after they've already read it,
Yes.
technically.
So there's actually two funding mechanisms or revenue models or revenue streams.
Mhm.
There's pre-publication and post-publication.
Okay.
So I've just described the post-publication there. It's tips. Pre-publication, we have a donation system as well based on quadratic funding, an invention of Vitalik Buterin's, Ethereum founder, for those who don't know. That's actually amazing and hasn't really taken off outside Gitcoin, that I think is going to be huge in the future. It's kind of a cross between markets and democracy. Instead of $1, one vote, or just one person, one vote, you have dollars. But the more you want to spend your dollars, the more it costs you. So it makes it hard to buy a system if you're really rich. So the reason we're implementing that is, one, we want our writers to have support from their communities. So the more, let's say you've got two writers competing for funding, one writer gets $100 from one person, another writer gets $100 from 10 people, they will get way more from the Olas matching pool, because they are more seen as more valued by the community. That's one reason. So we want the journalists connected to their communities. The other reason is, in our system, which I haven't mentioned yet, to keep quality high, we expect everyone to stake money on their work. And if you're just starting off and you're being asked to stake money, that's a bit too high stakes. So we need to support journalists who are starting off with funding to be able to stake on their work. So that's the kind of the dual rationale for that system. So once you've raised money, it goes into a smart contract on the protocol. Let's say you've raised $1,000, and then you write your first article and you stake 50 on it. 20% of that 50, so $10, would go on a bounty for fact checkers to find something wrong with the article. So every time a journalist posts, they know they've literally just funded people to find a mistake. So it's quite high stakes. And if issue is raised, then a random judging panel is formed that basically forms a blind prediction market. It'll only be 6 to 8 people, because I think that's all it would need. This is for news, because it's kind of fact checking.
Yeah.
We've different markets for opinion, much more complex system. But yeah, and then the judges would kind of come down on the prosecution versus the defense, the fact checkers versus the writer, the journalist, and they'll get an overall score. And then that score will dictate how much of their stake they get back, and also, crucially, how much of the tips they get. And the tips they don't get, let's say they only get a score of 20% because it was just really badly inaccurate article, 80% of the tips will flow back into Olas funding pools that will fund other journalists in the future. So it all gets recycled.
So that's where you are totally not incentivized to publish anything.
Yeah.
That is not true.
It's very high stakes. And I don't think, the analogy I use is, we have different types of security on blockchain. So if you want to send 100 million around the world, you're probably going to use Ethereum or Bitcoin. You know, they're super, super secure blockchains, but you have to pay for it. The gas fees are higher. Now, it still costs you $5 or something to send 100 million. But, you know, $5 isn't suitable if you're trying to do transactions in a computer game.
Yep.
For cents, right? So then you'd use a Validium roll-up or something that's nowhere near as secure, but it's cheaper.
Yep.
Our system, I suspect, will be the most secure information source or information platform on the internet. So you won't often find, if people want to write some entertainment news or something about some celeb, they mightn't write on our protocol, because like, who needs to stake money on that? And do people care if it's accurate? Most people who are reading it kind of don't really care. They're just in it for the gossip.
Totally.
But if you are writing news that might shift $1 trillion stock markets, people might want you to have staked money on it. Or, you know, reporting on government decisions, policy decisions, all this stuff we require high trust for. We expect we'll excel in that area.
That's great. And this is something I wanted to ask you a topic on, to touch on gossip. You said that the Guardian and the Telegraph are both of the newspapers that have like super contrasting views and sides. And obviously that's a big theme in the US too. Just like everything is it's not like this anymore. It's like this. So how many people that read news and just general folks only go to news for gossip or to hear what they want to hear? Kind of like that confirmation bias thing.
Yeah.
Have you talked about this at all? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like the most read newspaper in the UK is The Sun, and it's pure entertainment. It's
garbage. Yeah.
It's garbage, but it's also quite funny. Like, they do really funny headlines and stuff, you know, puns and quips.
Yeah.
like something ridiculous, like 30 million of half the UK population reads it every month, like at least
That's
an article
crazy.
from it.
How?
Um,
That's insane.
yeah, it's mad. It's Rupert Murdoch's publication, but it's not, weirdly enough, it's
Oh,
not as political as Fox in the US.
mhm.
It's kind of more centrist. They often support Labour. They always back the winner of the election because they know who's going to win.
Yeah,
And
that's
they
hilarious.
try to represent the people, I guess. But yeah, they people read that for entertainment, but then they go to BBC for their news,
Sure.
or
Oh,
when they
okay.
really want to be sure of something. But then that's one aspect. So there is a huge entertainment aspect to the news, or newspapers at least.
Hmm.
Um, but then you've got your confirmation bias, which is I don't think people read the Telegraph and the Guardian for entertainment per se, maybe a little bit, but they're mainly trying to get informed. But the problem with that is they probably read those newspapers because they agree with them anyway in the first place.
Sure.
And as you just said, like society's becoming ever more polarized as a result. Neither side is talking to each other, and they're absolutely shocked when they hear the other side's opinion.
Yeah.
They've never
Yeah.
considered it, and they think it's absolutely insane.
It's true.
Yeah, and this is something that is really hard to fix within the institution, within the centralized institutional model, because somebody was always going to have control, and someone will always try to find this niche to kind of make money in.
Hmm.
The Guardian has their readership, their loyal readership. They're not going to change now. That's their market. If they give it up, they mightn't exist.
Yeah.
So the only way you can free yourself from that is by building a decentralized platform, I think, which nobody owns, with, I guess, a revenue model that doesn't reward that type of things, which is very hard to do. It's a massive experiment.
Super.
But I think I've cracked it. We think we've
Yeah.
cracked it, and we're going to take a stab at it.
Okay. Yep. I think you're the closest I've seen to anything that is trying. It doesn't seem like a lot of people are necessarily going after this because the model has to be really unique.
It's
And you've
really hard
obviously
one to do.
yeah, you've got prediction markets, you've got staking, you've got like everything involved to make it happen.
Mm.
And then that also leads to a question of is all of this is this business model too confusing for people that spend their life writing for newspapers? Like,
I
can they pick this up?
Yes and no. Weirdly, if I explain them the mechanics of the opinion markets, which I don't even think I should go into right now, it will absolutely bamboozle people.
Yeah,
But the thing is, if you try to explain the math behind Uniswap to people who swap on Uniswap, they would bamboozle them as well. Like they
mm,
just look at you like you had four heads.
hmm,
But Uniswap does I don't know how many trades a day. They just have to swap X for Y.
totally.
So once we have built all our mechanisms, our UI will abstract all that away, and it should be quite
Mhm.
simple.
Beautiful.
You'll have to explain certain rules, but it shouldn't. It honestly shouldn't. The best thing they need to know is like, if you're truthful and honest and try to do the best you can, you should get rewarded in this system.
Yeah.
And otherwise, if you're not, you're probably just not very good at your job, and
Yep.
maybe find something else to do.
Yep. Absolutely. And how do you feel about our generations growing up and getting news and all information from social media? I think in my opinion, it opens up for a company like Olas to really flourish because like my parents and my grandparents grew up reading newspapers and that was just like the source of information. You had like
Mm.
news on the TV, that was the source of information. Now we have social media where we can pick where we get our news versus simply just consuming it. Is this
Yeah.
something that you feel like Olas is being aided by?
Um, well, weirdly enough, I think that's one of the main reasons the quality of the news has gone so severely downhill.
Mhm.
It's because the whole new dynamic is grab attention, grab attention. And
Mhm.
if you think about how newspapers used to work, there were physical copies. You walked into a store and you would have, I don't know, 5 to 10 newspapers in that store. And their moment of competition was that second you're looking across the shelf. So the only thing that was really sensationalist and tried to grab your attention was the front page headline. And once you'd bought the newspaper had your the owner had your attention, and
Sure.
all the rest of the newspaper, the journalists were kind of free to write, what they wanted to write on, like report accurately, et cetera, et cetera. But the internet completely changed that game because you now share individual articles that are competing not just with other newspapers, but for people's attention for God knows what else in social media, silly videos, people writing posts about whatever. And they're in this complete attention warfare. And to win, they've had to come ever more sensationalist. Add that to getting the click with advertising revenues being squeezed left, right, and center. It has led to a serious dumbing down of the news. The news is becoming more like social media rather than the other way around.
Yeah, totally.
So I see Olas as part of the fix because we aren't a slave to the click as much, but we still would be a bit. If a journalist wants tips, they're going to have to get eyes on the article. But what I'm hoping for, and we touched on it there, talking about Forecaster, there are other social media projects in the works or already have started that are beginning to think about how to deal with misinformation themselves in a decentralized fashion. Community Notes is a stab at it. I think it's not good enough yet, but it's a very good start, and we can make it better. So that will tone down that element of it as well. You won't get rewarded for this inaccurate virality, hopefully. And then you add Olas onto that. I hope, pray that the online discourse will get a lot better in the next decade or so.
All right, preach. And as first order of business, are you going to be sticking to crypto news?
We're like an agnostic. We're just protocol developers.
It's just going to be, okay, awesome.
Yeah. So someone was asking me recently, like a VC, in fact, what's your distribution strategy? I was like, we don't have one. We're not like people when you say publishing platform, they treat you by the rules of traditional public publishing platforms. You have to think about these things. Now we're kind of just creating a system that incentivizes really high quality information. And on top of that, see us as a base layer for information on the internet. Like Ethereum's a base layer for transaction security on the internet. And on top of that, people will build their own publications on top of Olas, and they might focus on crypto or they might focus on football or whatever, but that's their decisions.
Okay, great. And I just thought of this. I like Blockworks a lot. I don't know if have you ever worked with them or chatted with their team or anything?
I don't think I've directly, well, probably on Twitter. I'm quite active. But no, I don't. I can't say I've had intimate chats now.
Yeah, I like how Yano, the CEO, took the path of building trust through his own brand. He's super active on Twitter. He's constantly posting on LinkedIn. He hosts lives at night. He's got his podcast. He has built his face as the brand for Blockworks, which I think worked really well on that trust factor, because I go to Blockworks for my crypto news. That it totally worked for me at the very least. And I'm quite selective, I would say. I try and be. How do you feel like brand of personalities and people is going to play into Olas' success?
Yeah, it's a weird one because as a decentralized platform, you're kind of aiming for that not to matter, but people are people and it just does. And I have to embrace that, I think, as the founder. I'm certainly going to be, I already am active on X. I was anyway prior to building this. I just like the cut and thrust of it. Where I will forward this project as much as I can and publicize as much as I can, but always, I think a good role model is Vitalik. He's still 10 years later, extremely active, engaging with the community, forwarding Ethereum because he thinks it's a force for good in the world, but it's still very much as a neutral player. And I guess that's kind of what, particularly when you're dealing with news, like if you want to stay above that, dichotomy I was just talking about between the Guardian and the Telegraph and the culture wars, etc., you have to remain steadfastly neutral. So I have to toe that line, I guess, walk that tightrope.
So your marketing strategy is going to be more brand focused, of course, because it's a decentralized protocol. So I would say the trend right now is founder marketing. You're not
Mm.
focusing on that. You have a team of marketers that are just trying to spread Olas's brand and image with publishers at the moment.
Yeah. What do you mean by founder marketing? So,
Yeah, so, by chance, did you see it was my algorithm is a lot of, like, hiring trends and things.
uh-huh.
Last week, there was a lot of discussion about hiring whether a company should hire CMO, crypto marketing agency, or the founder should be the brand of the company. Did you see this at
Okay.
all?
I didn't. So weirdly enough, we're discussing this with in-house quite a lot.
Really?
And yes, my marketing team are saying this is the trend. It is founders, people follow people. They rarely follow projects, weirdly enough. And there is a push to kind of put me more out there,
Mhm.
which I'm totally happy to do. I am.
This is a
I
good start.
just yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Got our podcast.
exactly. But yeah, I guess I got to get that strategy right, I suppose.
It's interesting, again, there's no the conversations were going on and on. It was like 2 days of heavy, like, hundreds of replies and all these threads. But I just think it's interesting to talk about, when you're trying to build a news company, and I'm seeing different tactics right now for like, just for
Yeah.
example, yeah, I liked what Yano did at Blockworks. But anyways, so we're going after publishers first as target audience so you can build your product out. At what point do you start going after people? Do you totally cut that out for now while you're looking for publishers?
As in readers, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. I get well, they're going to be incentivized from the start as well.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, we're doing an opinion markets testnet competition soon,
Ooh.
which will hopefully drum up interest in readers. It'll kind of show them how they can do well in the protocol in the future. You basically can make money by reading the news in the future,
That's beautiful.
which is a first. Because at the end of the day, who's better to do crowd control than the crowd, or quality control than the crowd? Um, so we'll be opening their eyes up to the incentives there as well. But yeah, main focus is getting the team of writers on board, and I think if we have a product as in actual articles every day, plus economic incentives to quality control those, I expect the masses will come. But we'll obviously market it as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I did wanna talk you choose how much you'd like to talk about it, but prediction markets are so cool in news. It is the first example of what clicked for me of why AI agents could add value. Because
Mm,
someone said to me, an AI agent could, for example, scrape data on the weather, bet on prediction markets on the weather, and
mm.
make those prediction markets 10x more accurate because they can scrape the web for data better than any person or somebody else can. Um,
Yeah.
is that kind of what we're going at here?
Yeah, there's some of that. Now, the thing is, agents have to have access to breaking information, so that might be a challenge. But there's a
Mhm.
couple. I see a couple of benefits. First of all, they're way cheaper. Like
Yeah,
the main benefit of AI is its cheapness.
yeah,
And prediction markets, weirdly enough, everyone's known about the power of prediction markets for decades, and we
yeah.
haven't really harnessed them yet. Most people think that's because the regulators kept clamping down on them. That's one massive reason, don't get me wrong. But there's another reason is that outside of sport and politics, you don't have these crazies who will always just back their team. And those crazies actually end up as a subsidy to more shrewd participants. So without those crazies, there often isn't an economic incentive for someone who might have information on the weather, to use your example, to enter a market because they're like, oh, what's the payoff here anyway?
Sure.
Where AI changes that game because they can enter a million markets at once and all they have to make is a few cents in every one.
Mhm.
So there's that aspect. Another aspect is, yes, speed. Like, for example, Vitalik was proposing for speeding up community notes. One of the big flaws of community notes is by the time a post has been noted, the reason it has been noted, even in the first place, it's already gone viral and it's wrong.
That's true. Very true.
And you're basically the horse is bolted. And there's a whole lot of research on the fact that people, even when they've read misinformation, even when it's debunked, they cling onto it because
Yeah.
it's this confirmation bias we're speaking about.
Yeah. It's hard.
So getting that before the horse is bolted is a massive thing. And I think AI can really help there. And it can help in our fact-checking news markets, I think, as well. So that's from my perspective, I think that's where it'll help us most anyway.
Okay. That's beautiful. Do you want to touch a little bit on how the prediction markets work exactly? Did we talk about it directly? We've talked about it a few
Yeah. So
times.
the fact-checking prediction market is kind of a broad term. Like
Yeah.
our judging, our jury panel, whatever you want to call it, for news is a mini prediction market.
Yep.
And then we have another one for opinion markets. I'll try to keep this high level. Opinions are a weird one. They're basically predictions where we won't be able to verify if they're right or not for a very long
Sure.
time. And that is a huge problem. If you write an opinion piece on our platform, you can't wait 100 years to find out what happened with climate change to be proven right.
Mm-hmm.
But there is such a thing as good opinions and bad. So
Mm-hmm.
we've been really working hard on a mechanism that will allow us to settle a market after 2 weeks with a score we think is actually going to get the best from the crowd at the time.
Okay.
And the reason vanilla prediction markets won't work is because the truth isn't going to come out for a long time. If you're a contrarian, you've absolutely no incentive to bet because you know the majority opinion is just going to win now.
Fair.
Where if you have a contrarian view on Apple stock, you know when the financial results are posted next quarter, you're going to be proved right. You'll go, I'm going to make my bet. So that doesn't happen here. So I went digging deep into psychological literature and social science literature, and I found this mechanism called Bayesian truth serum, which asks respondents to, first of all, predict what the crowd thinks. So let's say 70% will be in favor of this opinion, 30% will be against, and you get rewarded for how accurate that turns out to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that releases you then to say what you think, because your reward is not how popular your opinion is, it's how surprisingly popular, as in, let's say you predicted 70% would agree with the article, but actually 75% agree with it. That's a surprisingly popular answer, and you get rewarded for that. And the initial reason it was invented for was to get people to be honest in surveys on stuff like drug use or political opinions. The famous polymarket whale used a variant of this. He did the neighbor method, where instead of asking Trump supporter or anyone on the phone, are you supporting Trump? Because sometimes they just won't admit it.
Yeah.
He said, who's your neighbor supporting? And they told the truth about themselves.
That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So this French guy made millions on polymarket.
I heard of this guy. Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of a variant of it. So that was the initial rationale for it, just to get people to tell the truth. But then about 10 years after inventing it, the same guy realized the surprisingly popular answer itself is really predictive of outcomes, more predictive than traditional forecasting methods. And it is a perfect tool for getting minority contrarian voices into markets. And doesn't mean they'll always be right. It just means the market gives a better signal because everyone's involved.
Uh-huh.
And then we can settle after 2 weeks on all sorts of questions that are really hypothetical or counterfactual or just evolve an answer that's years and years away. So we've built a market around that. And we're really excited about that, actually.
This is brilliant. I can't wait to go back and listen to this because I need to go through some of your points there.
Okay.
That's very, very cool. And I love the bringing up the whale and poly market because I think that's really relevant to crypto too. And something that people watched happen in real time. Poly market proved that prediction markets can be, or at least it proved to more people because folks that were already involved in it already knew that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
As a part of opinion pieces, obviously I understand that the scoring is hard. The more data you use, does that give it a higher scoring? Because although it can be opinion, as long as you use more data to back that opinion, does that make it more truthful?
Well, it makes if you want to get a good score, you're going to have to make it easier for people to evaluate you.
Hmm.
So that's, yeah. So the more information you give them, and crucially, the more you cite other information. And
Sure.
this leads me to another benefit of our protocol. We inbuilt a citations reward system.
Hmm.
So if you want to get a good score as a journalist or an
Sure.
academic, you have to cite other people's work. Um, but if you do cite it, you have to pay them a little tip as well. So
Mm.
for really
Oh,
impactful pieces of work, whether it be a newspaper article or an academic work, that some academic works are cited 100,000 times and the person never gets paid.
sure.
Imagine they got $1, there's 100 grand. So
It's amazing.
that's a yeah. To answer your question directly, they're very much incentivized to share as much information as possible, and the people who create that information in the first place get rewarded too.
Okay, this is beautiful. Okay, I we can move on to the end. Do you have like 4 minutes? I want to ask you a
Yeah,
little bit about. Okay,
yeah.
um, I want to ask you about the team, building out a team. You've been in crypto for a really long time. You've seen the industry grow talent wise.
Mm.
How did you choose who was on your founding team? You said you have about 15 folks right now. If you've permanent marketing, PR, what
Yeah.
did that look like for you in building that out?
Um, at the start, I focused on engineers at the start.
Mhm.
Very much competence.
Why?
Why?
Why engineers at the start?
Oh,
You just
well,
the
I guess
product?
they are going to help me with designing the mechanisms and building it out. You have to
Mhm.
have, the thing with Web3 protocols is you can't really just put a good enough thing out there. It has to work from day one, because let's say you upgrade to version 2, you can't even be guaranteed people will follow you. A lot of people still uh, use Uniswap version 2, so it's there forever and it kind of has to work. So it really ups the stakes of development. So yeah, we spent a year, just engineers and myself, mechanism designers, getting these things right. How do I look for people? I did a fairly thorough interview process. I was heavily involved myself. Once I got a CTO involved, he was also by my side, so he was able to uh, obviously feed much more in on their coding experience, and I would very much test their blockchain knowledge and their mechanism design knowledge.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, we built a team. We're only a team of 5 in that department, and although we've got 15, the rest are actually consultants and external hires. So some of that was recommendations, people in the space, but very happy with everyone.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I totally agree on hiring engineers first. The why was more of just, you know, question everything, let people hear your thought
Okay.
process. It's good. Okay, and then we can kind of teeter out here to let's talk about goals for Olas in 2025. Obviously, you said you've got a test net. What's the plans for 2025?
Yeah, the big one is getting opinion markets out, the test net.
Beautiful.
Um, we are coding that up right now. It requires quite a few things. We need private voting, which is really not easy to implement.
Hmm.
But we're like, the space is so great. It's all open source. We get to piggyback on so many people's work. The guys over in Aztec Network, who raised a ton of money and they still haven't launched, but they've done some really cool stuff if you're into that thing. So we're using a lot of their work. Starknet, who we're building on, are helping us a lot there as well.
Hmm.
They're obviously world leaders in zero knowledge proofs. So they're very useful to have on our side. We need proof unique human, because the whole thing breaks down if you have people setting up 1,000 accounts and gaming the system. That one in the long term will be stuff like WorldCoin. We might try have some smaller stopgap for the testnet, because it's not a massive. I don't think gaming is going to be a massive thing for that.
Yeah.
And we want to get something out there. And then, of course, the mechanisms, the Bayesian truth serum mechanism, we need to code that up. We've done half of it so far. So that plan is to launch that in April. Big, massive marketing around it. Do kind of guerrilla campaigns. So if someone says something on X and we get to go, well, everyone here, you can participate in judging this is a good opinion or not. Get involved, earn testnet tokens, and they'll be convertible for a real Olas when the time comes. So get involved. And that will run from probably end of April/May to August. And from then on, we will start building out the news part of the protocol
Mhm.
and fine tuning AI and launching sometime next year, mainnet full thing.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Um, I do appreciate I know it takes a long time to build out these things. It seems like you're really not rushing too much into stuff. You're trying to get the product right. It seems like you've done a lot of also research on theories and making sure you're implementing it right. Because if it's there, you gotta make sure you did the work to get it right. Because it's hard stuff.
Yeah, like, this is high stakes. We're
Yeah.
securing information, and once you
Yeah.
release it, you can't tweak it.
Totally.
That requires a huge amount of battle testing, both in theory, mathematical theory, and then actual in the wild, like we're about to do.
Mhm.
There's that aspect, but then there's also the aspect of like crypto just hasn't really been ready. Like there's no real app yet. Mass Polymarket's the best thing we've got, and it's probably just benefiting from regulatory arbitrage because
Yeah.
the regulators have clamped down on prediction markets left, right, and center. So it's taking advantage of that. But in terms of going up against stuff that's already established, Web3 hasn't made inroads yet. And a lot of that is first, the tech wasn't ready. I think it's getting there now. But second of all, it hasn't proliferated. Everyone doesn't, nobody's bank accounts are on the blockchain yet. All that stuff that is a huge friction to getting involved. So even though I had this idea probably 4 years ago, I only pressed go 2 years ago. And timeline basically for mass adoption is still a decade away.
Yep.
Hence why we're not in a massive rush. But I do believe now is the time to start making a stab at it at least. I expect within 3 years, we still should have quite a lot of users.
Awesome. Oh, beautiful. Okay, those are all the questions I've got for Olas. I've got two questions that I ask all my guests. First one is, what is your favorite book?
My favorite book changes quite regularly. I'm not one that
Yeah.
gets emotionally attached to books, but reading Everything is Predictable by Tom Chivers at the moment.
Cool.
It's basically a theory that Bayes' theorem is our God, and I kind of agree with it.
Really?
This is my own confirmation bias. I believed it anyway in
Yeah.
the first place. It's kind of reduces humanity to LLMs. Everything we say, every action we take is on the basis of experiences we've had or priors.
Mhm.
So everything we do is a prediction. When I get out of bed in the morning, I'm predicting it's a good idea, etc., etc. And it's a really good way of getting people to control all these other biases that stop us seeing the right things the right trends to latch onto, I guess. So yeah, really cool book.
Very cool. Adding it to the library. And how do you become a good decision maker?
Um, my problem is how do I become less of a good decision maker? I think I can be quite rash. I suppose it's all protocols, isn't it? Like anything.
Mhm.
Set a goal, set you know the set levels of information you need to make the decision and a time frame and go with it. And don't be afraid of being wrong because you can learn from it.
Mhm. Beautiful. Love it. All right, Ciarán, that's all I've got for today. I really appreciate it. This has been a very fun podcast. I probably have enjoyed this conversation about it's new, it's different. I like it a lot. It's very cool. And
Good
it
to
is
hear.
there's a clear use case for this type of thing. It's just there's a lot of crypto that is okay. My last point I'll make here is that I've been saying this recently. In the US, it's hard to explain why people need better payment options with crypto because that's the
Mm,
obvious use case. Something like this is very easily understood by people in my circles.
yeah.
Just because I like Venmo works for us. We've got Bank of America, Zelle, like all of my payment systems work. My friends don't get why I propose crypto as an alternative. This is
Mm,
different. This is something that's just a lot more tangible. Everybody gets why news is bad.
yeah, and it's
Love it.
Venmo's cool, but it's not global.
Right.
This
So
is we're aiming to be a global platform. Like I think Venmo payments are kind of like they're single click, right? You don't have to sign up every time you're
they're
paying and stuff.
they are very easy. But it's
Yeah,
only US, so when I'm with my friends in the
yeah,
Netherlands, I can't do anything.
exactly.
It's
Yeah, yeah.
frustrating. But they don't get that. Like if I don't know, like I do have friends in Dublin actually and in the Netherlands and um I have to talk about them sending money, and we can't do it. And a lot of my friends don't have friends that are overseas, so it's
Mm.
just it's a bubble. But I love it. I like the decentralized publishing. Thank you for your time. If you have any last words, the floor is yours. But I appreciate it a lot.
All right, I've said my piece. Thanks for having me.
No,
Really
seriously.
appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll get this up on Monday. Have a great rest of your day, and
Thank you.
I'll talk to you
Cheers.
very soon. Thank you,
Cheers.
Karen.
Thanks, Lindsay. See you. Bye bye.